Welcome to r/Tales from Your Server. It's the place where waiters share awesome stories about their guests. The first story is, chronically understaffed? Want to harass me every day? Hope you like being even more understaffed. So I recently got a job at a local brewery. For the most part, this job was, let's say, decent. They were basically a 2-star restaurant posing as a 3.5 star. They wanted the waiters to memorize the ingredients of all the food off-duty, memorize the beer-making process despite literally nobody asking about that. They had tests you had to take after a while, or they'd withhold your tips. Despite all that, 95% of the staff were decent human beings. Except for one, Jeff. First, a little context. They claimed that they'd give you 4 days of training before putting you on the floor. Theoretically, you'd be paid a decent wage during that time, except for the fact that once you started actually working the floor, they just combined your untipped wages with your tipped wages, so you're basically working for 4 days at $3 an hour without tips. Still, you need to train, I get it. Day 1, the restaurant is swamped with customers, and they have only one server in the front. I spend the whole day running dishes. Day 2 and 3, actual training. Day 4, really day 3? They get swamped again, and they decide enough is enough and give me tables. Day 5, introducing Jeff. Note that at this point I should only be on my first day actually being a server, with 2 extra days of training under my belt. He introduces himself by asking if I'd been telling the truth about being a waiter before, as it certainly didn't look like it. Talk about an introduction. I was busy, so I didn't have time to respond, but this sets the tone for our subsequent meetings. Now we're going into the holiday season, so things are very busy, and I'm working full-time. And while everyone else is supportive and encouraging, Jeff finds it utterly impossible to say anything in a positive way. I'd forget a soup spoon and he'd make it out to be the literal work of Satan. Meanwhile, the kitchen is consistently sending the soup out at 70 degrees, and the dishwashing staff are leaving 8 or 9 tubs of dishes in a line, forcing the waiters to basically do everything but throw the dishes into the dishwasher for them. This culminates in probably the worst day of my life. I'm extremely sick, to the point where talking or moving makes me miserable, but I don't want to leave them short-staffed, so I mention in passing to a different manager that if someone else wanted my shift, I'd be happy to let them have it, if they wanted some extra cash. Mid-shift, I have a rare 3 minutes where we're caught up, and one of the other servers checks our respective takes and finds that mine is a full 50% higher than either of theirs, so I offer one of my tables, that I'd already seated and taken their order, to the waiter with the lowest take, which he happily accepts. About an hour later, this phenomenal D has the gall to come up to me and tell me that I wasn't pulling my weight, because he heard I was asking to take it easy and have less tables. He follows this up by saying that since I wasn't pulling my weight, remember, up 50%, he was going to have me switch to being a busser after the holiday crunch was done, and he still didn't believe I was telling the truth about being a waiter previously. Seriously? I very nearly blew up right then and there, but I was tired and sick and didn't have the energy to deal with this BS. So I kept on going, hit the end of my shift, folded every bit of silverware I knew to find, and asked a different shift manager if I could leave, and he said yes. I clock out, and this absolute A-clown comes up to me and says he didn't give me permission to leave. He sends me back to start folding more silverware, off the shift, using the crappy stuff they keep for the waitstaff. Not only that, but he said that I was going to have a test on the ingredients the next day, despite having barely worked there for 2 weeks, and the official policy being you were tested after a month. I was raised not to be rude, but that night was the angriest, the darkest I've ever felt in my life. I wrote some very dark things when I finally got home. I knew I couldn't hurt him in any meaningful way. Nobody would take the word of a new employee over an established manager, and I didn't want to overly burden my actually good coworkers. But at this point, I have nothing left to lose. If I'm going to lose my job anyway, I'll do it on my terms. So the next day I went to the office. I told them I was going to work one more day, told them everything about the SH manager, that my leaving was 100% his fault, and everyone else was good. That last day I worked my A off. I worked harder than any 2 other employees combined. I gave one of my most helpful coworkers a chunk of my tip from the previous day as thanks, and I left with my head held high. I don't know, maybe it didn't hurt him at all, but even little things can stack up. And I hope that someday when his career comes crashing down, it was my straw that broke the camel's back. The second story is, after 15 years, this Friday is my last shift in the services industry. So here's a list of all my favorite customer complaints. Not 15 years to the day, you understand. That would be far too poetic and magical, but 15 years roughly. I started working in a Chinese buffet place when I was 16, running dishes and scrubbing pots. I saw 2 grown women fight over a double-booked table. It came to blows. One pushed the other over. Fried shrimp and cheap Prosecco took flight. The husbands tried to intervene. They were unsuccessful. And on that day, I became a man. I would jump from services to retail, to hospitality, then back to services. Hired, fired, rehired, fired again, promoted, demoted, burned, scarred, and have held almost every position in a restaurant, outside of general manager, to which I am very grateful for. After 15 years, I've finally bagged a non-services job. My last shift is Friday. Everyone at the place I currently work is sad. My manager is sad. The regular customers are sad. I am pretending to be sad. But the one thing I'll never forget is the stories. The tales of Karens clawing their way up through the pits of heck. At night, they fill my dreams, asking if the chicken is gluten-free and demanding to speak to the manager. I don't think I'll ever run out of stories or stop enjoying the look of horror spread over people's faces as I recite them for those who have enjoyed the luxury of never working in our sector. So without further creative ramble, here are the top complaints I've received from customers, organized in a list, in no specific order, because that sounded like too much work. What do you mean you can't give me a beer? Give me a drink, ya, or I'll have a word with your manager and get you fired. Smug look. Context. Fast food restaurant thought it was a good idea to serve beer. We were open 24/7 and stopped serving beer at 10 p.m. Every weekend, or around any major sporting event, as the bars closed and the drunk zombies stumbled home, they passed our sign, beaming like a lighthouse in an otherwise empty and dark street. A small tiny part of their brain, we call the Nugget Center, would light up, and a voice would start screaming nuggets in their ear. They stumbled in through the front door, see the massive POS advert for our new branded beer, and immediately come to the conclusion they could continue drinking here. This was particularly bad when large groups of tracksuit-wearing sluggers would swarm the place, trying to convince me to keep serving them, often with the wonderful phrase, "Show me the rule where it says I can't drink here." 2. My sushi is cold. Context. Or, my fish is raw. Or, where's the meat? Why is it all rice? Or, why is it so small? Kinda complaints you get from people who have no idea what sushi is and just want to try it because it's the office trend. Pretty confident anyone who's worked in a sushi place has had to deal with these idiots. 3. My disabled child said the food I ordered for my disabled child was cold. Do you know how hard it is for me to have a disabled child, and how disappointed my disabled child was when my disabled child ordered your food? Did I mention my child is disabled? Context. Takeout place, not exact words, but roughly this was the context of their argument. Their food was cold, their child was disabled. She genuinely shouted the word disabled louder every time she said it, and she said it at every opportunity. She also had no child with her. The best part? The receipt for her food was dated 7 months prior. 4. Excuse me, I booked. Why am I not allowed to sit down? Context. The building was on fire. No, I'm not making that up. A large neon sign had overheated, and flames started erupting from it. The restaurant had been evacuated. 4 fire engines were parked outside. The alarm was still going off, and the place was filled with smoke. The fire had been put out by this point, and the GM had returned to the building to turn off the alarm while the fire department examined the sign. Enter stage left, woman in early 50s, stands by the "please wait here to be seated" sign. FF notices her, wanders over and tells her the place is obviously closed. She huffs and leaves, walks outside and pulls out her phone. She downloads the restaurant app, makes a reservation for that day, then walks back into the restaurant, which is still full of smoke, demands to see the manager and proclaims loudly that she has a reservation, and the law requires we serve her. She was not alone. Over the course of the next few hours, which we were still around, several more people would attempt to walk into the smoky, dark restaurant. A few laughed it off. "Oh, I guess I need better glasses then, haha." And another demanded to know why we were closed, dragged my GM outside, and tried to point to the opening times posted on the door. "See, it's not 10 p.m. yet. You should be open." 5. The ice in my water has watered down my water. I demand a free replacement. And 6. What do you mean your staff won't go to McDonald's for us? We paid to be here. 7. The customer demanded a free replacement on her cappuccino because it was too wet. Context. I mean, how do you respond to that? After biting down my tongue to resist the temptation to point out that coffee is a liquid, which historically has always been wet, I get her to clarify. After a bit of back and forth, and with a lot of tutting, it turns out what she actually wants is a baby chino, some weird drink made up by upper middle class people, to give to children who want to sit in on the fun of having coffee with Sharon from Jazzercise class. It's all foam, with some chocolate powder sprinkled over the top. 8. Guy comes in, orders 2 cheeseburgers, 2 coffees, and a cake. Hands me $5 and looks genuinely offended that it didn't cover the full cost. Context. He wasn't old enough for it to be a generational thing, but the look he gave me when I told him the price made me think he'd misheard me saying something rude about his mother. He pulled out a 20, threw it on the counter, then yanked his phone out of his pocket and made a show of calling his friend to complain about the overpriced restaurant he was in. 9. How to order a coffee in popular student cafe. Wander aimlessly around the store for 10 minutes. Stare at the menu for a further 10 minutes, ignoring the man behind the till, asking if you need assistance. Wait till the vendor starts serving someone else, then glare at them. Order a coffee that wasn't on the menu. Ask for it to be topped off with yogurt and crushed almonds. Stare in disbelief at the menu for another 10 minutes, when informed the cafe cannot fulfill your request. Order a cappuccino. Leave the counter and await coffee by standing in the middle of the shop with your arms folded. Wait till vendor has prepared coffee, brought it to you and started to walk away. Ask for extra sugar. Wait till vendor returns with sugar. Demand a takeout cup. Leave requested additional sugar on the table as you walk out. Also includes this wonderful transaction at the same location. Them. Tea, please. Me. How do you like it? Them. Medium, please. Me. Okay. Sugar? Them. Yes. Me. How many? Them. With milk, please. Me. All right, so no sugar? Them. Just medium, please. Speaking of which, I really wish people waiting in line wouldn't jangle change and stare at me while I'm serving someone. What are they expecting me to drop everything I'm doing and run over to them and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't aware you had money." How foolish of me to serve that other person first, just because they came in and ordered before you. How crass of me. I do apologize. Anyway, 10. How can it possibly take you longer than 5 minutes to cook a full meal? I can do it at home in less time. Context. They had a lecture at 10 a.m. and made sure I was well aware of that. Came in around 9:40, sat down, ordered coffee, then at 9:50 a.m. asked for 2 full breakfast meals sit-in. I explained that it would take at least 10 minutes to cook both breakfasts and the extra coffee, and they wouldn't have enough time to get to the lecture hall at 10, but they ordered regardless. Paid, then 5 minutes later complained I was being too slow and now had to run. They came back later and demanded a full explanation as to how it was not possible to cook a full breakfast meal in under 5 minutes, line by line with exact cooking time specified. 11. In an attempt to prise open the door. You're still in there, I can see you. That means you're open. Stop trying to be lazy and serve me. Or words to that effect. This was so long ago I can't honestly remember what he said. I only remember that boiled ham face with its weird cheesy grin as he attempted to destroy me with facts and logic. Now, I've seen enough stories on this subreddit to know I'm not alone when it comes to customers trying to force their way into empty closed restaurants, so I won't bore you with the details, only that our door was on a motor. You turn the little key and the shutter comes down. While closing one night, 2 hands appear under the shutter just before it hits the ground, and an effort is made to push the shutter back up. Thinking this might be an emergency or something, I raise the shutter, only to be confronted by a man who rushes the door, glares at me, and starts pounding on the glass, demanding to be let in, because he'd caught us trying to close early. We'd closed on time some half-hour ago. Pulling the shutter down was the last thing we did at night. 12. What do you mean you will not honor this deal made by the previous business? Context, the restaurant sat on property previously owned by a large chain restaurant. That restaurant had closed down nearly 12 years ago after moving to a different part of town. Yet people still came waddling in with vouchers and coupons for that company, expecting us, a very clearly different restaurant, to honor them. Some arguments got very heated, and if I could tell you the name of that restaurant, you could go look at the hundreds of 1-star Yelp reviews, complaining that we don't honor other restaurants' coupon deals. And finally, 13. What do you mean you're open Sunday? That's the Lord's Day. Yes, this did happen. We received a very long yet very polite letter from a local priest, questioning our decisions to open Sundays and requesting we close that day in order to give the staff time to rest and pray, as our Lord, in one religion, did when he created the world, and threatened to preach to his pulpit to people not to come to the restaurant on Sundays. He also questioned a lot of other things that I won't mention in polite company, but let's just say if you dyed your hair blue, you were getting nasty looks from Agnes and the Sunday Squad. And that's all I can think of for now. Go away. Oh, and remember, if you do go into a stylish Asian restaurant, don't order the duck pancakes. Thank you for watching.